My name is Sydney Harper, and I was 11 years old when my house stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a test I hadn't studied for. People always said I was mature for my age. Teachers smiled when I spoke carefully. Neighbors nodded when I held doors open. My mother said it most often, usually when she needed reassurance that I didn't need her. I wore that label like a badge, even though I didn't fully understand it. I just knew being mature meant staying quiet, being agreeable, and not asking for too much. The morning my mother left, everything looked normal. That's what makes it strange. The sun came in through the hallway window, lighting up dust in the air. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. My backpack leaned against the couch where I'd dropped it the day before. Ordinary things doing their ordinary jobs. My mother, Laura Harper, stood by the front door, rolling her suitcase back and forth on its wheels. She looked lighter than usual, excited in a way I hadn't seen since before work became her whole life. "I'll be gone for a month," she said casually, like she was announcing a grocery run. "Europe." "Just me." I nodded, even though my stomach tightened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, pressing it into my hand. Then she slid an envelope across the kitchen counter. Inside was a credit card, shiny and new. "For emergencies," she said. "But you'll be fine. You're not a baby anymore. You can order food if you need to." I waited for more instructions. List. Phone number. Anything that sounded like a plan. Instead, she kissed my forehead, grabbed her suitcase and smiled. "This is your chance to prove how independent you are." The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door long after her car pulled away. The house felt too big, like it had suddenly stretched. I pressed my hands together to stop them from shaking and whispered, "I'll be fine." The words echoed back to me, thinner than I expected. The first day, I treated everything like a challenge. Challenges were easier than fear. I opened every cabinet and made a list in a notebook I found in my backpack. Half a box of cereal, peanut butter, a jar of pickles, 3 cans of soup, bread that was already stiff at the edges. The refrigerator was almost empty. Condiments, milk past its date, 1 lonely apple. I told myself survivors made do. I spread peanut butter thinly across bread, careful not to waste any, and ate slowly. I turned on the TV for noise, letting voices fill the quiet. When it got too quiet again, I explored my mother's laptop, hoping to see a message from her, something that said she was thinking about me. There were unread work emails. Dozens of them. None were for me. That night, I slept with the hallway light on. By the second day, the excitement of proving myself had faded. The house felt heavier. Every sound, a pipe knocking, the refrigerator hum, made me jump. I checked my phone constantly, even though there were no new messages. On the third day, hunger stopped being a small inconvenience and became something sharper. My stomach growled in a way that made me embarrassed, even though no one could hear it. I tried to use a delivery app on my mom's phone. I typed in our address carefully, chose the cheapest meal, and entered the card number from the envelope. Declined. I tried again, and again. That's when the fear crept in, quiet but determined. I started a new notebook that night. On the cover I wrote one word: evidence. I didn't know exactly why I chose that word. I just knew I needed to write things down to make them real. I wrote the date, what food was left, that my mom hadn't called or texted. I filmed short videos on my phone, speaking softly into the camera. "My name is Sydney Harper," I said in one. "I'm alone. Today I ate cereal for dinner." I almost deleted the videos. Felt silly, dramatic. Then I remembered the way my mom had smiled and said I'd be fine. Kept them. By day 4 I stopped checking the door, hoping she'd walk in early. I stopped pretending this was temporary. I started measuring time by meals I skipped. On day 5 the cereal ran out. I poured the last crumbs into my mouth straight from the box and drank water until my stomach felt full but not satisfied. When I stood up too fast, the room tilted slightly like I was on a boat. That night, I wrote something in my notebook that made my hands tremble. If something happens to me, this proves it was not my fault. I stared at the words for a long time before closing the notebook. Fear slowly turned into anger. I wasn't being brave. I wasn't being trusted. I was being forgotten, wrapped up in the word independent, so it sounded nicer than what it really was. By the end of the week, the house felt like it was holding its breath, and so was I.
By the seventh day, my body had learned how to move quietly, as if using too much energy might make something important disappear. I walked slowly from room to room, holding onto the backs of chairs when I felt dizzy. The house no longer felt like a challenge. It felt like a waiting room where no one called my name. Every morning, I stood by the living room window and watched the neighborhood wake up. Kids rode their bikes in loose circles. Parents walked dogs and talked about ordinary things. Backpacks bounced against shoulders as families left for school together. From the outside, my house looked the same as theirs. From the inside, it felt hollow. "She chose this," I whispered one morning, pressing my forehead against the glass. "She chose herself." The words surprised me. They sounded older than 11. I hadn't heard my mother's voice since she left. No calls. No messages. Just one photo she sent 3 days earlier, a selfie in front of a tall building, smiling, sunglasses on. The caption read, "Finally free for a month." I stared at that message until my phone screen dimmed. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. The sound was so sudden I nearly dropped my phone. No one ever rang our doorbell. Friends knocked. Neighbors waved. The bell felt official, like it belonged to someone who had a reason to be there. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. For a moment, I thought about pretending I wasn't home. But the ringing came again, firmer this time. I opened the door slowly. Standing on the porch was Mr. Hughes, my school counselor. He wore a jacket with the school emblem stitched on the chest and held a folder under his arm. His smile faded when he saw my face. "Sydney," he asked gently, "I've been trying to reach your parents." I stepped aside to let him in, suddenly aware of how the house must look. Dirty dishes in the sink. Empty counters. The quiet. He took it all in without saying a word. We sat at the kitchen table. The chair felt too big for me. "Where's your mom?" he asked. "She's in Europe," I said. "For a month." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "And you're here alone?" I nodded. My throat felt tight. I told him about the $20. The card that didn't work. The days that blurred together. I didn't cry. I just explained, like I was reporting facts for a project. His expression changed slowly, from concern to something heavier. "That shouldn't have happened," he said. "You shouldn't be alone like this." He explained things I had never heard clearly before. That leaving an 11-year-old unsupervised without proper food or support wasn't independence. It was neglect. There were laws about it, rules meant to keep kids safe. The word neglect echoed in my head. It felt strange hearing it out loud, like someone finally naming what I'd been tiptoeing around. I went to my room and brought back my notebook. "This is my evidence," I said, placing it in front of him. He read every page carefully. He didn't rush. When he finished, he looked at me and said something I hadn't realized I needed to hear. "You did the right thing by writing this down." My eyes burned, but I didn't look away. For the first time, I said it plainly. "I'm hungry." Mr. Hughes nodded and stood up. "Okay," he said. "We're going to fix this." He made a few calls, speaking quietly but firmly. One of them was to Mrs. Johnson, the woman who lived next door. I'd seen her gardening, always waving but never asking questions. She arrived quickly, her face pale when she saw me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt warm and real. "Why didn't you come to me?" I shrugged. I didn't want to seem immature. She shook her head. "Asking for help is not immaturity. It's wisdom." Later that evening, a CPS caseworker arrived. She spoke gently and asked permission before looking around. She opened the fridge, glanced at the pantry, and wrote things down. I showed her the messages. The photo from Paris. The notebook. The videos on my phone. She listened. Really listened. "We're going to make sure you're safe," she said. That night, I packed a small bag. My notebook went in first, then my phone, then a sweater, even though it was warm. As I walked next door with Mrs. Johnson, I looked back at my house. It stood there quietly, just like always. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside me something had. For the first time since my mom left, I wasn't pretending I'd be fine. I was being protected. Mrs. Johnson's house smelled like something warm and familiar, even though I had never eaten there before. It was the smell of food cooking slowly, of time being taken instead of rushed. The moment I stepped inside, I realized how tense my body had been in my own house. Here, my shoulders lowered without me telling them to. "Let's get you settled," Mrs. Johnson said gently. She showed me the guest room, a small room with a quilt folded neatly on the bed and a lamp that gave off a soft yellow light. On the dresser sat a framed photo of her late husband, smiling kindly. Nothing felt empty here. Everything felt lived in. That night, she opened her refrigerator and asked me what I wanted to eat. The question startled me. I hadn't been asked what I wanted in days. I hadn't been asked much of anything. I stood there, staring at shelves full of food, my mind going blank. "Anything is okay," she said patiently. "We decided on spaghetti." She moved slowly, explaining each step, as if she were teaching me something important instead of just cooking dinner. "This is how you brown the onions," she said. "And this is how you know the sauce is ready. You don't rush food. You let it become what it's supposed to be." I stirred the pot carefully, feeling strangely proud. When we finally sat down to eat, I finished the entire plate. The food didn't just fill my stomach, it quieted something anxious inside me. After dinner, I took out my notebook. Mrs. Johnson watched me write. "You're still documenting?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "So no one forgets." She nodded. "That's very wise." The next morning, we went grocery shopping together. She insisted on buying everything herself, but kept every receipt. "Just in case," she said. I understood what she meant. Evidence wasn't about blame. It was about truth. Back at her house, I filmed the full refrigerator with my phone. I felt strange doing it, like I was comparing two versions of my life. One empty, one full. The CPS caseworker returned later that day. She asked more questions, wrote more notes, and thanked me for being so organized. I handed over copies of my entries and explained how I'd tried to use the credit card. I spoke clearly, carefully, the way adults seem to appreciate. "You're very brave," she said. I didn't feel brave. I felt safe. Mr. Hughes checked in too, stopping by after school hours. He encouraged me to keep writing, not just facts, but feelings. "They matter too," he said. So I wrote about how being called mature had made me feel invisible, about how independence had been used like a shield to keep responsibility away, about how scary it was to feel proud of surviving something that shouldn't have happened. A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was sharp, defensive. "What did you tell them?" she demanded. "I told the truth," I said calmly. There was a long pause. That evening, the caseworker told me my mom was coming home early. When she arrived, she was angry at first, at the situation, at the system, at everything except herself. But when she saw the notices on the door and realized I wasn't home, something shifted. She asked to see me. The visits were supervised. Mrs. Johnson sat nearby, quiet but solid. Mr. Hughes was there too. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I showed her the notebook. "This is what happened," I said. She flipped through the pages slowly. The videos played without sound. The dates told their own story. For the first time, she didn't interrupt. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. "I am safe. I am not alone. And this is still not my fault." I slept better than I had in weeks. The house felt different when I went back, not empty anymore, but cautious, like it was waiting to see who we were going to be now. I returned home only after the rules were clear. There were lists taped to the refrigerator, emergency numbers, meal plans, after-school arrangements. A neighbor was officially assigned to check in. My mother, Laura, was required to attend parenting classes and counseling sessions, and a caseworker would be visiting regularly. None of it felt like punishment to me. It felt like protection, finally written down where everyone could see it. For a short while, I stayed with Mrs. Johnson during the weekdays and came home on weekends. She hugged me every time I left, slipping snacks into my backpack even though she knew there would be food waiting for me. I kept my notebook with me at all times. It had become more than evidence, it was my anchor. The first counseling session was the hardest. We sat in a small room with soft chairs and a box of tissues on the table. Mr. Hughes was there along with a family therapist. My mother looked smaller somehow, her shoulders curved inward. She didn't start talking right away. When she finally did, her voice broke. "I thought calling you mature meant I trusted you," she said. "I didn't realize I was leaving you alone." I listened without interrupting. That was one of my boundaries now. I didn't rush to make adults feel better. "I was scared," I said quietly, "and hungry, and I didn't know if you were coming back." She cried then, real tears, not the kind meant to end a conversation. She apologized without excuses, not for being tired, not for being stressed, but for leaving. The CPS investigation concluded a few weeks later. The word neglect was written clearly in the report. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was honest. There were consequences, classes, monitoring, regular check-ins, but there was also a plan to move forward. Slowly, trust began to rebuild. We started eating dinner together every night. Even simple meals mattered. We talked about school, about feelings, about things that had once been brushed aside. My mom checked in daily, sometimes too much, but I learned it was okay to ask for space without losing connection. I kept writing, though my entries changed. They were less about survival and more about healing. I wrote about how independence didn't mean being alone. It meant knowing when to ask for help and believing you deserved it. Mrs. Johnson stayed in my life, not as a replacement, but as a reminder. She came over for tea. She taught me more recipes. She became my safe place outside my home, a living example that adults could care without disappearing. One day, I read through my old entries. The shaky handwriting, the fear hidden between the lines. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt proud. I had survived something that shouldn't have happened. And I had spoken up. Now, when people say I'm mature for my age, I smile differently. Maturity isn't silence. It isn't endurance. It's understanding your worth and protecting it, even when that means holding adults accountable. My house feels fuller now, not just with food, but with attention, with responsibility, with care.